Em
and Lex,
two imperfect six-figure business coaches, co-founders, and friends who decided to combine our superpowers to bring to market something we wish we had when we entered the world of coaching.
a real, non-BS, intimate, and fun community built with integrity, intention, and a few glasses of wine.
In this podcast, we get real.
Real about life,
Business,
relationships,
and what it really takes to find your version of success in the world of coaching. Are you ready, Lex?
I'm set, Em.
Let's coach.
Bonjour.
Hola.
Ça va? Comment allez-vous aujourd'hui?
Ça va bien, et toi?
Mucho gusto. Different language.
Bien.
Hola, mis amiga. How's it going today, Em? How are you?
En nuestro episodio estamos hablando solamente en otros idiomas.
You have a great accent.
Gracias. Yo estudié español en la escuela.
I know. And then you lived in Argentina.
Y Costa Rica, y España, y México.
I'm sorry, you lived in Costa Rica?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
What?
When I was going into my junior year of high school, I really wanted to go to Spain, and it was super expensive to go to Spain. And we had a family friend that had just done an exchange program living with a family in Costa Rica. So I researched it. I proposed it to my parents, and they're like, yeah, that sounds cool. Also, note, my parents didn't really care what I did in a way, which was funny. And so I moved down. I found a family to live with, and I did a program called CPI. And I lived in the rainforest, Monteverde, with a family who lived in a house the size of this room, who I still keep in touch with today. And I was supposed to do 1 week there, 1.5 weeks there, and 1 week at the beach. And I ended up just enjoying my time so much. I also kind of had a lover. He was a British man who was 5 years older than me, and I was 16.
Wow, scandalous. Wait, you were there for a week?
I was supposed to be there for a week and a half and then switch to another homestay in a different part of Costa Rica, but I really liked the family, and I really liked this guy. And so I ended up staying for 3 weeks, and I still keep in touch with him. His name is Dan. He lives in the UK. He's a doctor. Met my parents. It was funny.
Way less cool and way less hot than Greg.
Way less cool and way less hot. Obviously. They would love each other though. And it wasn't like I was 16, we were making out. Like, that's my lover. I just
He was 5 years older. You scandalous girl.
I know. But
in America, he would have been arrested.
I know. But what's funny, I ended up marrying a guy who's 6 years older than me. And then also my mom was married to a man 21 years older, and her first husband was 12 years older. So like age difference wasn't really a thing. But
Middle women are just into the older men.
But it cracks me up. I was 16 and he was 21. So that still is a significant age difference.
It's a life. I was listening to one of my other favorite podcasts, shout out to Morbid, and 5 years age difference just depends on life phase. It's all about life phase. Like 16 to 21 is very different than 32 to 37.
I talk about it with Greg all the time. I'm like, so would you have hooked up with me when I was 12? He was like, what? Like, stop.
It becomes quickly creepy.
Totally. So the answer is no. I want to clear his name there. But anyways, so I lived in Costa Rica, and then the next summer I did 2 weeks in Oaxaca, Mexico, and I lived with the same family that my mom had.
Like a longer vacation. You weren't there for like multiple years.
No.
Got it.
But it was like with families though.
Homestay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
cool.
I say lived because technically I lived with them, but yeah.
I get it now more. When you said that, I'm like, I'm sorry. Like and I was extending that period in my brain. That is so cool and such a squirrel from what we were going to talk about, but such a welcomed squirrel. And I feel like I learned something new about you, which you just never keeps our relationship exciting. And
it does. Our couples therapist says we got to keep things fresh. So date night, when is it happening, Lex? You got to plan it. You're the man in our relationship this week.
Oof, we're having a little bit of an off day, which actually inspired today's topic, and we'll get to today's topic in a minute. But I do want to bring us back to a real honest moment with the fact, and Emily, I'll let you kind of speak here, but I got a text from Em today, and I just wanted to give her a big virtual hug. This is when I wish you were next door, because you aren't loving the day.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's like part of my cycle or whatnot, but it's like once a month I have heavy boots. And I think I've talked about heavy boots on this podcast before, but it's basically this feeling of just you're sad, but you like don't know how to articulate the sadness, and nothing's causing the sadness. You're just like, oh, and it might be also, it's Thursday. It's been a very, very action-packed week. Last week was my birthday. And so it was like all celebration, and there's a lot of party. And so it's kind of like the hangover, the celebration hangover that I have. And so I woke up this morning. First off, I let my husband have my side of the bed because he has been having back pains on his side. I woke up with back pain. So I woke up with like a shoulder neck pain that really doesn't feel awesome. And then I ended up, because my phone was still on my side of the bed, like missed my alarm. So I woke up 2 hours later than I had hoped. And so it was just like these little moments. And also the night before, last night, I had an event in New York City, which I wasn't at. And there had been this miscommunication with the venue where the person who had been coordinating with my emails were going to her spam. And so she made the assumption that I was canceling the event. So first off, people, don't ever assume anything about anyone. Don't ever do that. And so she was not there to host the event. We had 15 people signed up. So I had to scramble and find a last minute venue, which bless the people who helped me accomplish that. But it truly, for me, Lex, it manifests in my shoulders, and I feel like my tension in the shoulders, and I feel that like resentment in my shoulders. So I think it was just a combo. So then I just woke up being like, I feel like this could be a day I stay in bed all day. I'm not.
Yeah. And I thank you for being open and honest and sharing that with our listeners, because, and this is what inspired our talk today, guys, is the fact that sometimes we have this false perception of others, that everything's glossy, that everything's perfect, when behind the curtain, behind stage, that's not always the case. And for me, I think this is important to talk about. I have long-standing mental health. I've struggled with mental health. I've been in therapy since I was 12. I'll be completely honest. I've been on many medications. Yet sometimes when I meet people, because when everyone listens to this podcast where Emily and I lay it all out, they're very surprised to hear this. They're very surprised to hear that this is something. Sometimes, Emily, you just had 500 reasons that would bring anyone down on the, best of days. For me, I can wake up sometimes and there's no reason. Everything could be going great. And it's just a day. And so we'll kind of start there. And again, I'll bring us back to what we're talking about today, which there'll be positives too. Don't worry. This isn't just a Debbie Downer, but we did want to talk about the behind the scenes of success in coaching and in life.
Well, and I love this conversation because so many people make assumptions about both of us. And I hear it from my family too. My sister is like the exact opposite of me. She's very introverted, but because I'm present more extroverted, there's a lot of assumptions that are made, like, oh, Emily, of course you wouldn't be scared to do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh no, I'm terrified 90% of the time that I do X, Y, and Z, or when I introduce myself to a stranger. Like, I still have fears of rejection and imposter syndrome and talking to people who are more accomplished than me or less accomplished than me, or am I talking too much? Like my brain, my inner dialogue, but because I'm more outwardly approachable or talkable. I don't know if that's a word. I like to talk to people more. People just like blanket statement a lot of things. And I think the same thing goes with you, Lex, too, where I feel so lucky to have the candidness of our friendship and our relationship, where people make assumptions that you're super extroverted and outgoing, which I don't think you would identify with.
I'm a Wait, extroverted introvert. There we go. So I can turn it on, but my battery gets depleted real quick. And I'm very happy alone watching
Yeah.
Netflix by myself. Being social can take a lot out of me. And yeah, especially when, outside of Ready Set Coach, I have a career in PR, which is a very, social job.
Yeah.
Yeah, people make a lot of assumptions. People, and this conversation today is so transferable to so many walks of life. When growing up, one of the biggest things that I was got irked by in high school is because I'm very blonde. If you have never seen a picture of me, go to our YouTube channel, see me. I'm very blonde. And everyone would always think I was a cheerleader in high school. And I would always fight back. No, actually, I'm the one they cheer for. I'm on the basketball court. So
Yeah.
really, really easy to place stereotypes or assumptions on people in life. In fact, there's something about that is human nature. We've done that to others 100%. We're not saying we're perfect, but it's
Not even
worth
a little bit.
pausing, to talk, and we're going to share like some things that have happened behind the scenes of our business, and get real with you and some of our clients.
Yeah. So I think this is a great transition into just expectations versus reality, or especially in life and business. So we touched a bit on what our expectations are, or expectations are of us. And I'll also share this story that just came to my mind. But when I was little, I'm a generally sunny person. And when my mom would see me as a teenager not sunny, she would be like, "Where's my sunny, happy daughter?" And so then that fed into like the narrative that I had to be sunny to be liked, or to be accepted, or to be respected, or fill in whatever word there. So there is that expectation where you're like presenting to the world certain things. So I think in terms of life and business, like we've had our ups and our downs in both our corporate worlds and also our entrepreneurial worlds. And Lex, I would love for you to share your story of your behind the scenes of your corporate world, like what the outward facing looked like versus the reality of what was happening internally, even leading to your departure.
So much PTSD. No, okay. So let's start outward, right? If you go to my LinkedIn, or if you were following me on social media over the past decade, you're gonna see that I moved to LA, and I quickly title climbed. So I was at a very glitz and glam PR firm, and I quickly at a young age became a senior account director. Then I become an in-house director, and I represented all these glamorous properties across LA. And then all of a sudden I got this really, really great man in my life. I moved to Ventura, and now all of a sudden I'm a VP at the fastest growing telecom in America. And oh my God, my career is rocketing. And pause. Yes, those were true, but they are so only part of the picture. There was so much more going on behind the scenes. With that first PR firm, I was paid SHIT. I actually had to have 2 extra jobs to even afford to live in Los Angeles. So while yes, on LinkedIn, I was a senior account director at this really cool firm, I was working my ass off behind the scenes. Yeah. They weren't paying me. And believe you me, there was many tough conversations that happened. Go fast forward to the telecommunications company. And I love that company. I have the most respect for them ever. But if you have listened to this podcast, you'll learn that journey ended with me in the hospital because of how many things were happening behind the scenes that ended up manifesting physically in my body. So that was a very Cliff Notes. Even that, right? That explanation was Cliff Notes. Emily, similarly, I see you and I think New York and fashion and all the glitz and glam, but what was going on behind your curtain?
Oh, I thank you first off for sharing your curtain. And I know there's even more things, like even with your apartment and not navigating
so many things,
so many things that we don't touch on. For me, I was working in fashion, and similar to your story about PR, like people would message me on LinkedIn that they were literally like, "I would kill for your job." which was a little scary. And I
They
was
actually
getting,
might, because it's
yeah, I
not.
know. I'm like, please don't. It's not worth it. But I was getting paid. I think I started off being paid $40,000 at Ralph Lauren. I thought I was a millionaire too. This is a time when I graduated into a recession. You're essentially told
Well,
to,
that's a lot more than I was making, actually. My first
really
job, $27,000 in Los
stop,
Angeles as a senior account director,
stop.
which I think is illegal.
That is illegal for
Yeah.
sure. My rent was $1,100 for a closet room, basically on a fifth floor walk up on the Upper West Side, which I still think about very fondly. But I remember working at Ralph Lauren and having this moment where I felt so shitty about myself because my boss, I was in charge of keeping the RSVPs for a very prestigious event that was coming up. And I had mistakenly put Diane von Furstenberg on her own line and Mr. and Mrs. Barry Dillard on a separate line. And I got reamed at like it was like I was the stupidest person under the sun. Like, how could you not know that Diane von Furstenberg is married to Barry Dillard? And I was like, I knew nothing.
As you're telling the story, I'm like, huh? I don't get it. So I don't know.
Oh, and then she, this individual would then share with me that, like she'd call me sweetie and honey, and she'd be like, "Are you like, is this just too hard for you?" And so all its sense of self and worth was just like tossed into the trash. But it was the stupidest things, and everything felt so high rush. And part of me wonders if this is also just like a coming of age story of trying to make it in like the marketing PR world, event world of life. But then similarly, yeah, I had many of those types of experiences going and bouncing around to different companies. But one, to your point, like making money, I remember I would babysit on the weekends. Like I literally would spend my Fridays and Saturdays babysitting for usually like my boss or my boss's bosses who lived in these $4 million beautiful apartments in New York City. And I remember also getting shamed by my boss for babysitting. Like, aren't you too old to be babysitting? But also at the same time have this
Give me a raise.
yeah, but also have this expectation to be buying like $800 dresses and showing up and wearing a certain thing. It really felt Devil Wears Prada in moments of time. And it took a lot for me to understand, like, is everyone drinking a Kool-Aid that I missed that everyone
Is doing it easier.
something
Emily,
differently? Yeah.
okay, this might ethically like turn people off, but the dress thing I have to say, because you're expected in PR too to always have like a fancy dress. So what I did, I lived in Santa Monica, is I'd always go to Nordstrom's, I'd buy a dress, wear it for the night, then return it the next day. Yep.
Totally. We had sample closets at one time, like when the
Oh,
companies were smaller, so I could pull from sample closets, which was nice. And also we had a really, really great discount. It'd be like 60% off wholesale. So
well, you were in fashion. I wasn't, but just
yeah.
again, behind the scenes, like if you were to look on my Instagram, you'd be like, wow, she has a cool outfit for everything. Little did you know, I was bordering the line of shopping
Oh.
ethics there.
Oh my God, 1,000%. Yes, in all of that. Yes, in all of that. And also my meals, like I had no food in my fridge. I would just go out to events every single night and get fed. I literally, like, my diet consisted of wine and cheese boards. And I probably was made up of like a few almonds as well. I was terrible. I was so unhealthy. I was so unfair to myself and my treating the way that I treated my body, even the way that I write, or that when I reflect back on my diaries at that time, because I've kept a diary since I was 10, it was just so full of hatred of myself. Like, why wasn't I smart enough to know the names of the people on the guest list? Or like, why am I not skinny enough? Or why am I not fill in the blank thing why am I not desirable that this partner wants to stay with me? Like all of the behind the scenes inner turmoil was definitely real. Lex, how can people find out how to work with us?
Super simple. Go to readysetcoachprogram.com, link in show notes. And so I think a lot of people listening, depending on where you're at in your life, are either in this moment or they can relate to having semi-similar of their own story. And now you might be thinking, okay, cool guys. Yes, you had a hard past, but now you guys are living La Vida Loca, right? And so talking about coaching and talking about today, first I want to highlight that in part of my stories, I was attracted to the business model of coaching before I knew I actually liked to coach. I'm very honest about that. And I was attracted to that because I was very smartly targeted and saw the coach sipping the margarita on the beach. And then I'd watch the webinar, which made it sound so easy. And this seemed like such an easy business model that why wouldn't I try? And parts of it are easy, but that is so far from the full picture. Emily and I, we are very proud with what we've built and where we're at, but we are still not exempt from behind the scenes moments even today.
Oh, 1,000%. And I feel like there's moments that I reflect back on feeling so high and mighty. And then there's moments more recently that I have not felt that, but then I felt it the next week. And so knowing that it is a roller coaster of emotion and turbulence and whatnot, and also personalities. I think the hardest thing about coaching and maybe this is like our own doing, because we take such pride in helping people get to where they want to be, that if we can't get them to the finish line, or if they're not yet there, like it feels like it's our personal responsibility to do it. So before this call, I was just working on a client, one of our one-on-one clients, and like the behind the scenes, and Lexi's like, "You do so much." I was like, "Yeah, so do you." We're so invested, which is probably it's a blessing and a curse. Like we're so drinking the Kool-Aid of what we've created that we want to make sure that we're helping them get to like the biggest and wildest dreams. But sometimes it can also be detrimental to our own happiness and health.
Yeah, I think it's really humbling that we ourselves have to be reminded to practice what we preach, right? Like we have, I mean, if we had a penny for every time we said the line, "You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink."
A lot of horses.
I know, but we still have moments where we'll reflect and we'll go, "Well, why didn't this person do this or that?" And we'll somehow take that upon ourselves. That's real, guys. We still do have moments where we take that success and we put it on ourselves, even though we're showing up and teaching others to not, because we're human. We falter. We too need those reminders. And so I think it's important to hear. Yes, we might be further along if you're listening to this podcast than you are in our own coaching journal.
We should do a coaching journal. That's a good idea.
But that doesn't mean we're perfect. That doesn't mean we always get it right. That doesn't mean that we too are human and we have ebbs and flows and everything in between.
Oh my gosh. I feel like, Lex, we should talk. And I know we've talked about this before about like the failures. And I don't want people to be like, this episode, y'all, is so depressing. But I think it's great to illustrate the learnings from past failures. And failures is a strong word, but I don't like to think of it as a negative. I like to think of it as an opportunity. So I'll share with you the first time I decided to launch a group. I think I marketed it once. I'm sure I shared this in another podcast. I marketed it once and I got one person to sign up and literally was petrified. I was like, "Oh my God," but I said it to the world, so I have to do it. I'm a big believer. If you say it out loud, it doesn't matter if one person showed up, you are servicing that one person. And so I led this group with one person in it. And she essentially was getting one-on-one for a group cost. And it led me to reflect on how I showed up for the future when I marketed a group, the different strategies, the different techniques, the different ways that I approached people. And luckily that hasn't happened since, but it scared the SHIT out of me.
Well, let me talk about something that happened recently to us, because I think this is we're far along in our journey here. Not as far as others, farther along than some. So I'll start with the positive. We just had a phenomenal event this week with 6 Degrees. There was a packed house of women. It was the perfect size. It was great. Our ideal clients were there. We were in our zone of genius. Successful event, check. Fast forward, rewind like 3 weeks ago. And Em and I had an event where 2 people showed up. One was a man, which is totally fine, but we're usually market to women. And what we had expected, because there had been like 24 signups or something, it was through Eventbrite. 2 people showed up, and and not necessarily 2 people that were the right fit either. But we still did it. We still gave them value. We still showed up. And here's an example of Emily and I are the same 2 people. We didn't magically change in the last 3 weeks, but we still have moments where not every single thing that we do is successful.
Oh, and I think what sucked about that too is you see 2 people in the audience and you're like, oh my God, do I just cancel it right now and here? Oh no, I have to show up and I have to like give my full self to this group, even though it's 2 people that aren't my right people. Yeah, and that's a fun learning that we can talk about on a Today Show one day, hopefully, you know, and I think it's similar. And I know we keep coming back to social media, but it's a fascinating like mind effery in that I've had these moments, and I'm sure you've had this too, Lex, where you're like, wow, I'm gonna like drop some knowledge and some wisdom right now, and the world is gonna go bonkers for it. And then you post it, and it's like every person on Instagram just decided to take a hiatus.
Literally, I mean, this is one of the things we were talking about pre-show that was one of the reasons that inspired this topic. Is I posted what, for me, I have a little bit of a challenge sometimes being vulnerable. I'm going to be really honest about that.
You're gonna be vulnerable about being vulnerable.
I know I'm going to be vulnerable about being vulnerable. I posted a picture. It was a static picture, and no, I didn't do a ton of hashtags, which God, the algorithm and all the changes, it's hard to keep up, but it was a real like behind the scenes, like here's a pretty picture of me and my daughter on vacation, but this is what was happening behind the scenes. And I was expecting to at least get like some love. Well, I did get some love. Specifically, I got one person to comment, was Emily, and like 10 likes. And so that's kind of the impact that I was expecting wasn't there. But I lived, but I survived. Like, it's okay, right? Was it a bummer? Yes, but you kind of have to move on.
Yeah, no, Lex, you need to put more suffering in the picture next time, and then you'll get the likes.
I know I didn't complain enough. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's terrible, but it is funny. I think there is this, and we'll wrap it back up. But one of the things that I think is fascinating too is like you have this expectation of your coaching business, or you have this expectation of your business also to be loved and supported by your nearest and dearest. Like you think your best friends are going to be the ambassadors shouting from the rooftop and like dropping connections left and right into your inbox. And you might be surprised that those aren't the people that are doing that. And the reason I'm sharing that too is even for you sharing your expectation versus reality on social media, you're like, at least my friends will like it, right? Right.
Right.
You know, and I think there is this evolution of self when you do become an entrepreneur, where you have to find the tribe and the teammates that are going to be there for you on the shitty days where you can send them a text message and they've got your back. And then they're going to be there on the days to celebrate your wins as well. But also to kind of check yourself that might not be your family. That might not be your sibling. That might not be your best friend who will take a freaking bullet for you, but it's like cultivating those connections beyond.
100%. And the last theme on coaching I want to share before we wrap up, because this is something that's true of the industry, and it's something I've seen with a lot of clients, is when you do reach a point in your coaching business of success and you finally feel like there's momentum, some part of you kind of forgets that this might not always be this successful, and this momentum might stall for a moment. We've had tons of clients who will have 3 fire months, and then all of a sudden they have a dry month, and then they start to freak out. So like, what changed? I thought I finally figured it out, and now all of a sudden everything else is going to be great. And in coaching, there are going to be ebbs and flows. In business, there are ebbs and flows. You might have a killer launch in spring, and then fall might be harder. Totally. That is the reality that I wanted to preach real quick before we wrapped up.
Yeah. I want to even say the days of the week. I'm going to go back to the events and tell you how I had to reschedule an event find a new venue last night. Then today I woke up, we had an event in LA. I had 3 people signed up. I was like, what? Literally a day apart. is it the season? Is it the summer? Is it the market? Like there will be a day of joyousness where you're like, that's the exact number I wanted. And then there'll be a day where you're like, is this thing on? Like, is my event ticketing system broke? It's broken. That's what it is, right? It's broken.
So here's your homework, and I'm going to give credit to my therapist. Again, I'm being open that is part of my life. This is homework she gave me, and I think it's really, really relevant to what we're talking about today. It's really a reminder and a challenge, actually. Next time you find yourself caught up on the front stage, so what you're seeing, the face value of something, take a moment to pause and just ask, but do I know what's going on behind the curtain?
Mm-hmm.
And think of a high moment in your life, or a post that maybe you've shared, or a friend where all looked hunky-dory. Was everything hunky-dory the month before that? Was everything hunky-dory? Where did hunky-dory come from? I don't know. That word came. We're using it. Basically, the challenge before I squirrel on my vocabulary is just to pause and remind yourself that this is the highlight reel that you're seeing. And the highlight reel is never the full story.
Amen to that. And hunky-dory, I think, was an SAT word that we had to use.
Yeah, well, okay.
Just kidding. I kid.
I have no idea where it came.
Hunky-dory.
Hunky-dory. We just had to end on a light note, a hunky-dory note. We appreciate if you listen to this whole episode for hearing our hearts. We hope you feel a little less alone, whatever you're doing in life. Also, make sure to celebrate the heck out of those wins.
Yeah, amen to that. And we will see you the next time on the
Ready Set Coach podcast.
Bye-bye. If you're enjoying the Ready Set Coach podcast, please leave a review wherever you are listening. For more information about Ready Set Coach, visit readysetcoachprogram.com.